The program has been arranged. We're going to have 4 more speakers on individual topics. Murray, help me with the order. Who is next then? Is that Jeff?
Jeff Siegfried.
Jeff Siegfried, if you would come up. Jeff's going to kind of reminisce a little bit and talk about transportation in Watrous. Jeff, go for it.
I can't reminisce like you guys. This will drive me crazy. You see that? That's right. That's right. Thank you, Lionel. My name is Jeffrey Siegfried, and I was born here in Watrous at the Union Hospital in 1968 to my parents, Janice and Ken Siegfried. I have a sister, Gina, who lives with her family in Calgary. And I married Karen Wilson, and she's the daughter of Don and Diane Wilson. We have one son, Jacob, who is 13 years old. And I've been asked to speak a bit about transportation and the evolution of it and the importance of it to Watrous and Manitou and this whole region. I've been working at Mainline Motors for 30 years now. Never thought that would ever happen. Lionel told me that, I think I'll just jump in here. In grade 7, you warned us that 3 of us would be dead by the time we're 40. You did, you threatened us. Yeah, and I'm 13 years on borrowed time, I think, but I've been working at Mainline for 30 years, and before that, my dad, Ken, worked at Mainline for 18 years as bookkeeper, so I guess I have cars and trucks in my blood. Now, I'm not one of the fanatics about cars and trucks, so don't question me about the firing order on a Chevy small block or something like that. But I've lived with vehicles my whole life. And I'm nearly 50 years old, and there's been a lot of changes. And when I look back upon history, the 50 years that I've lived in are just a small part of that. Because I went through the history book, and I visited with people like Lionel and Murray, and my wife's grandfather, Orrin McIntosh, guys that grew up here. And visiting with them just opened up kind of a dream state, and I thought back to what it was like to live here in the last 150 years. So think about that, 150 years. It's a long time. But look where we've come from. You know, from the early automobiles, each decade had its own technology that changed. Can you imagine a car with glass windows? It's got an electric starter. You don't have to crank it anymore. Oh, what the heck? Automatic transmission. You don't have to shift the gears anymore. We have power brakes, air conditioning, amazing things. And that's going back to 1950, 1960. Now we're talking about voice command, navigation. You can connect it with your smartphone. You can be on the internet with Wi-Fi. There's self-parking, self-steering, accident avoidance, amazing technology. We're on the verge of driverless vehicles. And this was very interesting. I listened to a Canadian automotive software designer. He was talking in a video, and he was so passionate and so excited because he said, I have young children. And he said, by the time they're driving, by the time my kids are driving, collisions will be reduced because cars will know where each other are. We'll reduce car collisions because of technology. And he was so passionate and excited that his kids would be in cars that will save lives. Remember, they used to just have glass in the windows. Where have we come from? It's amazing the change that we've seen, and what will we see in the next 25 years. Stay with me, because this isn't intended to be a history lesson, but I've got to talk about transportation and the importance of it and the evolution of it. And I'm not going to put you to sleep. But I'm not going to talk about all the people involved in the last 150 years, because I promised not to put you to sleep. Transportation started on a grand scale with the railroad. When the railroad was here, Watrous began. And we wouldn't be here without the railroad. And I remember Karen Schrader-Mark said the other night, I never thought of us as a railroad town, but that's exactly what we are. Because we wouldn't have been here without the railroad. So I'm not going to go on and on about the railroad. It would take too long. But I wanted to talk about more businesses that grew because of that. I'm going through the history book and heard about livery stations with names like Leeson and Telford, blacksmith shops founded by fellows Robin, Berkey, Finley, and Edmonds. Moving into the 1900s, Lionel said this is important, that volunteer automobile taxi drivers would come to this train station when hundreds of people would come in from the east and from the west. All over North America, they'd come to Watrous to have the gateway to the Carlsbad of Canada. And everybody would come with their cars, and they'd just volunteer to pick people up and take them to the beach, and then bring them back again. And I don't know how that worked. If you just put up your hand, you got a ride, but you needed a ride, there was always somebody there from Watrous. All these automobiles had to come from somewhere. Watrous Motors, there was two brothers, Jimmy and Lyle Morrow, and subsequent partners Joe Townley, Bill Mollard, Alex and Ben Schrader. They were all early Ford and Chrysler dealers. Other names like Lou Friedman and Alex Mann, George Agar, Bob and Arthur Swift, Ralph Reed, Joe Jewell is a name that kept on coming back up, Ab McLaughlin, Jake Kernelson, and later Jake and Herb operated Acme Service, and that was my first memory of a Chrysler dealership in Watrous. Malcolm Laird of Laird Motors and later Louis Kiss operated a garage on Main Street. That garage was then purchased by Ed Clausen, Palmer Stocky, Orly Gerbrandt, and it became Mainline Motors. In 1965, Mainline moved into the Atlas block with a new partner, Guy Beatty. Now the Atlas block has its own history. It's now the bowling alley and Ms. Bojangles and the travel agency and the Watrous Gym, but the Atlas block was originally built by Jack Grest, and he was the first Ford and McLaughlin dealership back in 1919. At one time, automobiles were even assembled here because it was easier to ship them, partially assembled, and then finish them when they were on site. I never knew Jack Grest, obviously, but Jack changed Grest Motors from Ford to Chevrolet. I guess he was a smart guy. Paul Erickson purchased Grest Motors in 1939 and changed the name to Atlas Motors. He continued to serve Watrous area with fine Chevrolet automobiles. And as I mentioned, Ed Clausen and new partner Guy Beatty moved Mainline to the Atlas block in 1965 and then later to its current location in 1981. Gerald Merrifield, who worked at Mainline from the age of 16, was in search of a partner and called upon the young Mountie Don Campbell to join him in purchasing Guy Beatty's interests, and they became partners with Ed Clausen in 1985. Since then, Ed has since retired, and Don and Gerald started the Mainline franchise of dealerships that has grown into Kinnersley, Rosetown, Saskatoon, Virden, Burtle. So we have 5 dealerships in 7 locations. So that's a testament to their dedication. Don has since retired, and Gerald is the sole owner of the Watrous location, and his son Curtis and his partners own the rest of the location, but Gerald's the owner in Watrous. In 1962, there was a new building built in the west edge of town. That's where Pete Regina and Robert Sullivan opened West Side Service. In 1967, Maynard Fawson and Dale Hayter bought the garage and it became Centennial BA Service. And in 1968, it became Centennial Ford Sales. In 1985, Earl Ament Sr. purchased the business, and in 2006, he sold it to his children, Earl Jr. and Michelle Ament, and since then, Michelle has become the sole owner in 2017. Congratulations to Michelle. I've heard about automobile dealers from GM and Ford and Chrysler, Studebaker, Nash, and others, but I'd be negligent if I didn't mention some of the other garages that operated here over the years, because we had Dwayne Engel and Gary Ishwood. They sold International Trucks. Sly Yanishewski and his sons have operated a garage for many years. Francis MacArthur was a Chrysler dealership, and later Lori and son Rob Bennett opened Bennett's service in that location. Jim and Ken Crawford, and later Andy Deal on the corner of Main Street and 2nd. Alex and Ben Schrader of Watrous Tire, and now Ben's son Blair, as we mentioned, with 2 locations. Blaine Osmack started Integra Tire, and now owned by Vaughn Jones. Watrous Auto Body, Bill Callbeck, Norris Edwards. Spectrum Auto Body was Dan Hubick and Ted Skabinski. Later, Daryl McCafe and Tracy Fetterspiel. So how do I tie this all together? Watrous and area has prospered because of these entrepreneurs. Tens of thousands of vehicles have been sold here, creating jobs, but not just jobs, but careers, like my own. Good, solid employment for those that were directly employed or indirectly employed by these businesses. These people were and still are tireless, dedicated, and I'll say generous. Generous because they offer credit to their customers, and they're always there to help their employees when times get tough. These businesses support the Bonspiels, and they support the schools. They support minor sports, and they support the arts, and they support us with business taxes. They do all these things, and these businesses are the bricks in the foundation that we call Watrous. These men and I'll say the unpaid women that ran the scenes behind all these businesses are the reason that we had jobs. And all the people that came before us had jobs and made Watrous and Manitou Beach our homes. We owe a ton of gratitude to our forefathers and current business owners for choosing to do business in Watrous. Murray said, grab a copy of Prairie Reflections. It's our history, and page through it. To those young people here, when I say page through it, it's a rectangular thing. It's a book, and it's got pages in it. It's a paper, and you open it, and on the paper there's words, and it's printed in a way you can read it. If you're not comfortable with the printed text, you can always go onto the interweb, and you can Google Prairie Reflections Watrous, and it's right there. Thank you to everyone here for being part of the celebration, being part of the evolution of Watrous, Manitou Beach, and this whole community. Thank you all.